Welcome to episode 10 of the Press Conference podcast. We've finally hit double figures, and today I'm speaking to a football brand designer by the name of Payne. He's designed logos for the likes of Alpha and Town, Eastleigh, and a few others over in the US as well. We go over the whole process to design a football badge, how he got his first football club client, and why most football badges these days are rebranded to circle logos. It's a really good listen for anyone interested in graphic design or even marketing, so stay tuned if that's you. So Chris, just what exactly is a football brand designer to kick things off?
Well, hello Dan, thank you for having me on. It's really nice to speak to you and speak to your audience. I've been following this podcast quite a lot recently in lockdown, and as I'm designing, I've been listening to you and all your guests talk about all the stuff that you do. So thank you for having me on, first and foremost.
No problem.
A football brand is how your football club is perceived to the outside audience. So a lot of people think that a football brand is just the logo, and these days, it's not. In the past, that was certainly the case, but these days, there's a lot more to a football club's identity than just the logo. The logo is obviously like massively important, but what the logo is, it's a device that should identify your football club. It doesn't need to tell the full story of the football club, and it certainly should be relevant to the football club, but around the logo, there's lots more elements. So there's like typography and there's color. There's a photography style, and it's all those elements when they come together. What does it say about your football club? And so what I do is I work with football clubs from both England and then internationally as well, and we work out how the football club wants to be perceived. Does it want to be seen as like a modern, forward-thinking club? Does it need to be more of a traditional football club? And so I work with them to create their brand. We look at their logo. Does it need developing? Does it need redesigning? We look at typography. What does the typography say about the football club? What are the club colours? How can we use this in the wider brand? So it's all visual elements that come together to tell a story about your football club and also help how your football club's being perceived.
Yeah, brilliant explanation. Just you explain that now, I'm sort of really interested to get into this episode now. Just to sort of give a bit of a background before we get into the bits of, the processes behind the brand design and stuff. Is your background sort of graphic design then? Did you go to university? Have you had jobs in this sort of thing before?
Yeah, before becoming like involved in football and a football brand designer, I was a designer, just a graphic designer for many years. I went to university. I'm from Derby, but I went to university in London, and I was doing pretty well as a graphic designer, getting some big clients, and the money was pretty decent and all that kind of stuff. But it came to the point where I was getting clients like, I mean, the money was good and everything, but it was clients like a pharmaceutical client, for example, and I was doing some branding and some designs for them. And I think that's really the point where I thought, you know what, like it's cool and I really like the challenge and I really like being creative and all that kind of stuff. But pharmaceutical isn't really my passion. And I've always been like a massive football fan, always, since I can remember. And so I thought, well, if I'm gonna put all this time and effort into design, I want to do it with something that I really care about and something that I really, really love. So it just became natural, really. Big fan of design. I love the design process and everything, but also a massive fan of football as well. So working on those two things together is a bit of a dream, really.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people want to, go into the media industry, and sports seems to be the most popular one, which is why I sort of started this podcast essentially. So I mean another question I'd have for you is, what do generally customers get for their money? I mean, I assume it's not just a high res badge. I assume it's a big package you put together for them.
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I said earlier, a football club's brand isn't just the logo. So if you're a football club out there and you're working with a designer, you should be getting a lot more than just like as you say, a high res badge. So when customers or football clubs, when they work with me, I ensure that they get a new badge which is obviously relevant to them, something which is simple but well designed, as I say, extremely relevant to the football club. But then beyond that, there's a lot of other things that football clubs may need. They may need like custom typography, which helps with their brand identity. They may need, for sure, they will need brand guidelines, which is a very detailed document which explains everything about the football club's brand and how to use the brand and how not to use the brand. So I always make sure that when we're working on a project together, we're collaborating on the brand guidelines. There's video elements as well involved. There's templates, because when you design a brand, it's not, as I say, it's not just about the logo, but it's also about how the brand is going to be used. So I always give the football clubs templates for social media, which is something that I'm sure you're aware of, and a lot of your audience is aware of. So it just ensures that the football club's brand is consistent, but it also ensures that the people who are creating the media, they can quickly edit a template, and they know that the design is going to be good, it's going to be on brand, but it also helps with production times as well, because I know, especially on match day, I imagine everything's like really frantic and you've got to get content out as quickly as possible. And if you've got a template system which is in tune with the brand, then it's going to make things a lot faster. So there's a lot of services that I offer beyond the logo, but yeah, they all fit together to ensure that when you do take that big, because it is a big decision to update or develop your logo, it's like you're set up for success for the next 20 years.
Talk me through the actual very first part of designing, a football brand. Then, you've contacted the client, they give you a brief of what they want. What do you start off with?
It varies. No two clients are the same. So the most important thing in the process is the kickoff meeting. So as you say, we've been in touch with the client, we've been in touch with the football club, they've identified that they need to update and develop their brand. And so we have this kickoff meeting, which is usually around about an hour long, and it's a load of questions from me, and it's questions from them to me. And in that meeting, we're just really trying to get under the skin of what the football club wants to achieve, how it wants to be perceived by the outside world, what isn't working about the current brand, what will work about the new brand. The football club's history is also something that's massively important. Football clubs mean a lot to a lot of people, so I always try and ensure that the history and the traditions of the football club is always like encapsulated within the design of the new logo. So even though you're putting out something which is pretty modern, it's backed up by history, and there's a story behind it. So the starting point is the kickoff meeting, but then after that, I will go away and I'll do my own research, and that's what it's all about. It's about research, finding out about the football club, the history, previous identities as well. There's many examples out there of football clubs who have strayed away from an original identity, but then come back to it, but in a more modern way. So that is where it starts. And then beyond that, beyond research, when a couple of ideas pop into my head, I start to sketch them down, just a piece of paper, like no fancy tools at this stage of the process. It's all about being free and having ideas and doing quick designs, and some might work and then some might not work, but then you kind of get into a rhythm where you see, okay, well, this one's working because of this, but maybe I can change that, and you can just do it quickly on the fly, just hand draw in, and then just see which ones have really got potential. And there's a number of things as well that I look out for when I'm sketching. I think it's important these days that the logo or the badge says the club's name encapsulated within the logo. I think that's something that's super important. Yeah. So I always try and make sure that the typography works with the central graphic. I think also in the past there was a tendency for football logos to be a little bit too busy and a little bit too complex, and nowadays the best practice is that it's simple and it's got a single point of focus. So you would have like the main graphic as something which is highly relevant to the football club or the area that the football club represents. So yeah, I design with these best practices in mind, and then once I get a sketch or a couple of sketches which I'm really digging, then I put it into the computer and start the digitization of it and tweaking it and getting it to more of a real badge.
Yeah, just going back to the point you said about the research, actually, I think it's quite interesting because I did see the one you did for Eastleigh, and the documentary you did on it. It shows you've dug really deep into the history of the club and managed to get that absolutely spot on. How important is it for you as a logo designer to encapsulate the history and put that in a badge? Because really you're designing for the fans, aren't you, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always designing with the fans in mind, always. The fans' reaction is something that is massively important, obviously to me, but more so to the football club. So the fans are always in mind. So the research and the history isn't something that I overlook. On the Eastleigh one, they've got a really interesting story. But what I did appreciate about working with Eastleigh is they set me up really for success, because they sent me this book which had the full history of the football club since it was founded in 1946. And so I read this book, and it's like a really thick book, and it's got every single season in it and the former players and where they finished in the league, and it was a fascinating read. And I read it cover to cover just to make sure that I know everything that I could about Eastleigh Football Club, because obviously I've got the honour and pleasure of designing their new identity. So they sent me this book, and I read it cover to cover, and then found out that the history of the club is really interesting. Their original name wasn't Eastleigh; they were called Swaveling Athletic, and then in 1980 they changed their name to Eastleigh Football Club, and they had this affiliation with Spitfires, the Spitfire aeroplane, because it was manufactured and designed in Eastleigh. So in 1995, I believe it. No, sorry, in 2005. Sorry, getting my date. In 2005, they did a fan vote on what the club's nickname could be, because again, they wanted to progress and they wanted to have a nickname and an identity. And the nickname the Spitfires was chosen, and then that is ultimately what we designed the new identity around. So yeah, it was obvious pretty much from first conversations with the football club at Eastleigh that we would design a brand around the Spitfire, because it is so iconic, but also there's also a lot of buy-in from the fans. The fans identify as the Spitfires, and they really appreciate that nickname. So having a Spitfire as the central point of the logo, really, it made sense.
And it's quite a long sort of process, this logo design thing, isn't it? You know, I've seen on your portfolio websites, it can go on for 3 to 5 months in some cases. Is that purely just down to, you know, sending different designs to the client and redoing it and really getting into the design which they actually, you know, want to produce?
Yeah, it is. It kind of has to be a long process, because this is changing a football club's logo is something that happens once every 40 years, once every 20 years, something like that. You know, it doesn't happen very often. So you've got to get it right, and you've got to do your, as I say, research, but also you've got to do your tweaking of the design and experimentation with the design. You've got to make sure that even though, like, you might have one concept which you think is amazing and it's really good, you still have to go the distance on another concept and design an alternative concept. So there's something to compare it to. With Eastleigh and other football clubs that I've worked with in the past, I've always presented 3 or 4 different ideas and different concepts. So the football club can then, like the chairman and the directors, can then have something to compare and contrast. They all follow the same kind of best practices and design principles that I've got, but in terms of simplicity, having the typography incorporated within the design, having the logo relevant to the football club, obviously, making sure the logo is unique as well, and make sure the logo will stand out. But yeah, it can take a while, but the whole process is enjoyable, and there's back and forth between the football club and myself, and there's lots of refining as well. And that Dan, isn't that 3 to 5 months isn't just the logo, it's all the stuff around it which I mentioned previously. So it's the creation of the brand guidelines as well, which is vitally important. It's also the template system. It's also, like, once you've designed a logo, you have to kind of make sure that it works across various different medias, you know? Like, you'll know more than anybody, like it has to work extremely well on social media and digital media. Yeah. But also it has to, so like when the logo is created as a really small icon or profile picture, but then also it's got to work well on merchandise and fan gear and advertising outside the stadium or actually on the stadium, stuff like that. So it's got to work across different medias and different materials as well. So there's a lot of testing which goes into it. There's a lot of refining. It's a long process, but it has to be, really, to make sure that you get it right.
That was something I was quite interested in, actually. You know, you said there about the social media, you know, taking that into account when you're doing all your design stuff. I'm seeing a lot more circle logos. I mean, I'll take the example of Man City and, you know, Brentford as well. That seems to be the norm now when you're redesigning a logo for a football team. Is that purely the reason? Just so, I mean, like the circle, so it can fit into the Twitter image, or, you know, is the circle is that better for design? What's the reason for that?
It's a very good question, and it's something that I've noticed, and I think, you see, I've had clients come to me and say, hey, look, can we make it circle so it fits on social media? And I get that reasoning and rationale, but it's like you run the risk of looking the same as everybody else. There's a bit of, Man City started a bit of a trend in terms of football logo design. In fact, I would say even before that, the Scottish football logo started the trend, because you see this definite theme, which I personally, I don't really like, because I think football clubs are unique and individual, and they have their own traditions and they have their own story. So I don't think it should be kind of like this cookie cutter design style. I think you should strive to be unique in your branding. So what Man City, it's the Man City style, or the Scottish football logo style, where it's a circle and then it's kind of like a shield within the circle. And now I'm seeing so many clubs, both in England, but especially abroad, in America especially, having this style of logo. Like, you look at the Inter Miami logo, it's a great logo, and the football club's branding is really, really good. The colours are really nice, but it does look, if you break it down, it does look a little bit like it's following that Man City style with the circle and the shield inside. So I wouldn't recommend to clients that they go for a circular logo just for social media, because UIs, user interfaces change, and the design of things change. And who knows, maybe in the next couple of years, Twitter might do a redesign, or any social media platform might do a redesign, and the profile picture is square. And then you're kind of like, oh, okay. So I wouldn't, I certainly design with social media in mind, but I don't do it purely so it fits the space. I try to give the football clubs that I work with something a little bit more unique.
Another thing I've seen as well is the minimal color they use, and maybe one color in some cases, a real like less detailed design. I'm sort of thinking back to the, where they used to have the city arms as the crest or something, a real detailed design. Do you think they've gone back to, simplicity just because it's modern?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think, previously there was a lot of football clubs who had their logo, which was the city crest, which made sense at the time, because the logo would only be seen on the players' shirts on a Saturday afternoon. But nowadays, as you know, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, it's like football's a 24/7 thing. It's like, it's not, the logo isn't just being seen on the players' shirts. It's online, it's on TV, it's on merchandising, it's on advertising, it's all over the place. So a lot of clubs are going for a more simpler approach, and I agree with this, because it just heightens your brand. If you've got one of those old style logos, which is based off the city crest, and there's multiple colors and there's no real strong identity colors, then it doesn't really help your brand or your brand recognition. Whereas if you have like just two simple colors, then it will really help build your brand, and you can build your branding around that.
For sure. It must be actually quite satisfying for yourself as, a football logo designer as well. You see, you said you love football and stuff, it's your sport. It must be satisfying to actually see the designs like in the flesh. I'm thinking of, this season Alfreton are in our league. I didn't realise you designed the badge. I'm a big fan of it. And, you see it all around the stadium. It must be great for you as the designer to see that.
Yeah, you know what? It's the best. That's worth more than payment. Just seeing fans interact with it, and especially young fans, and also like some of the more traditional fans, when they when you hear, or you hear them say, or you see tweets online from people who have been supporting a football club for many years, but then they say nice things about something that you've created, the logo, then that's worth a lot more than any kind of payment. So that's probably really why I do it, just the reaction of the fans, and then seeing the players as well. It's like, it's weird. You're right, football is my sport, and I've loved it all my life, and I will love it for the rest of my life. But I always, as a kid, this is going to sound really sad, but I wanted to be a footballer, Dan, but it didn't work out. Yeah. In my head, I was pretty good. Yeah. In everyone else's head, I was terrible. But so in a way, it's kind of like being able to contribute to the sport that I love, and have a presence. I know that I'm far away from the players, but to have a presence on the pitch, like the lads who are running around are wearing like something that I've designed, that's come out of my head. That's always a real proud moment. And so when the season starts up again, because I recently designed Eastleigh's logo, I can't wait to see that logo on the pitch and see the players running around wearing it. So yeah, it's massive. Like, I'm proud of all the work that I do. I put a lot of work in and a lot of effort to ensure that it looks great, and it has an impact on the football club, and the fans love it. But like all the time spent and all the late nights, it's all worth it just to see like a young fan buying the kit and wearing the badge. It's amazing.
Do you sort of stay in regular contact with these clients then, or do you go and sort of visit the clubs and see it in the flesh?
Yeah, I do. I always stay in contact with them, because it's kind of like, again, this is going to sound sad, but it's kind of like a baby of mine. It's like you give over the logo, and it's kind of like, there you go, look after my baby. And so, yeah, I'm always in contact with the clubs and always trying to provide more to the club. Like, hey, whether it's like actually giving them new designs for social media, or if it's just in more of like an art director kind of role, just giving advice on latest trends and how they could maybe do a little bit better with their the positioning of their brand, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm always in touch. It's always an ongoing conversation, and I'm like always available. I when I'm working on a project with these clubs, there's a lot of communication going back and forth, and I think because the people who I'm involved with are real good football people, like they love the game and we've got that in common, and there's like good banter there as well. Like they become friends over the course of the project, and I look forward to the meetings with them. And yeah, I'm always in touch, and I'm definitely following them on social media, and I'm like every Saturday or Wednesday when they play, I'm always like hoping that they come home with the 3 points. It's a little bit tricky when there's a game between two teams of which I've designed the logo for both teams. It's like, I don't know, maybe a draw might be a good result, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like social media, you know, the match day graphics and stuff, everyone puts out nowadays and stuff. You said you transitioned from sort of, you know, the graphic design to just, you know, primarily football. Has that made that transition a lot easier, that football clubs are relying heavily on social media now and they need this service of branding and graphics?
I think so. I think it's never really easy to get into a football club and like redesign their brand, because there's so few teams that do it. I think more teams should. They should certainly look at their logo and see where it stands in the grand scheme of things, and see if it properly represents what their football club is about. But yeah, certainly the fact that football's 24/7 now, and social media content is so important to a football club now. It's fans aren't engaging just on match days, they're engaging all the way throughout the week, and they want to engage as well. So having the logo and having the brand set up for social media and digital media, and it can work across all medias really. I've seen a change and more of a want from football teams to like move in this direction of becoming that digital brand, but still have the traditional feel that the football club's history is based upon.
I was browsing your website as well, and I saw this sort of concept you put together, and it was like a secondary logo as well. I'm not sure if that's you know, is that more of like an American thing overseas, or do you see it coming into football clubs more prevalently in England?
That is a good question. I think so. Having experience of working with teams in England and working with teams in America has been a massive help. I think Americans and the way their sporting organisations are set up are very merchandising heavy, and they're very good actually with their brands. So I think a secondary logo is important. It just adds to the brand feel. So the one you're referencing is a team that I designed for in New York. Well, I believe you're referencing a team that I designed for, which is based in New York. It's a new team starting up, a professional team. They're called New Amsterdam Football Club.
It's a good name.
But based in New York, because New York's original name was New Amsterdam back in the day, a long time ago. And so yeah, I designed the principal logo for them. But then there was, in my sketches and in my research and experimentation stage, there was this other logo which I quite liked, a lot more simpler. And so I presented it to the ownership group, and I said, hey, look, this could be a really good secondary logo. And they were like, well, why do we need a secondary logo? And so I explained to them that a secondary logo is still part of your brand, but it's just used in some cases which aren't as formal. So, or when the space is too tight. So for example, it would be like a favicon on the website, or a secondary logo can also work really well on merchandising as a different range. So it just opens up like the offering that football clubs can give to their fans in terms of merchandising. Obviously, the primary logo is the design which should be most seen, and there should be like really good brand recognition with that, and that should be used in all formal cases. But the secondary logo just gives you a few more options. I think it will come into England a lot more, because additionally, football clubs it's not just about the first team now. It's like, you obviously have the women's team, and you have the under-21s, and you have the youth teams, and now even you have digital teams. Like you see a lot of football teams who have their esports. And so a secondary logo just gives you a little bit more options in your brand hierarchy.
Yeah, it's interesting really, because, you know, at York, it's something I've started to do sort of with our you know, social media graphics and stuff. I've sort of taken a little we've got like a little lion on our crest. We've got a few lions. I've taken the lion off, which obviously fans know as, you know, the York City lion. And I sort of use that as an icon on little things like photos and stuff on social media. And, you know, I think it's coming a lot more prevalent within, you know, the branding of clubs and stuff. So, yeah, I think it would, you know, from my perspective as a sort of media manager, I think it's definitely something which would be coming in more often. What I'm interested to know is when you design these things, as I said before, you do it for months on end. Is it just like one client at a time, or do you sort of have multiple projects on the go? And, you know, how do you actually manage that?
The projects are pretty long, as I mentioned earlier, three to 5 months. Sometimes they can go even longer than that. But yeah, I usually tend to have a number of different projects on the go at the same time, just because the opportunities are too good to turn down, basically. Like if a football club gets in touch with me and say, hey, look, I want to rebrand and I want to look at our identity and develop it for the 21st century, then it's like, I really want to help them out. I really want to help them. And I might have another project on the go at the same time, but still I will find time for it. I'll have less of a social life. I'll make sure that I'm able to do both. If it gets to a point where it's like, it's just crazy and I can't, and I'm not doing justice to the football club, then I'll obviously look at that. But so far, it works fine. It's like, even like I do, this is almost like a hobby as well for me. It's like I enjoy it so much that it's not something that I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, I've got to design that logo. It's like I'm literally wanting to wake up earlier so I can get into the files and start sketching and start designing the logo. So it's definitely a labor of love.
No, it's good to hear. So there's a lot of people, sort of young people who are listening to this podcast. For you, when you're sort of breaking into this football logo design, what was your first gig in this? And, you know, how did you actually get into it?
I know what you mean. I'll give you the long story, but I'll try and condense it. So I was a designer for many years, and I was working in Buenos Aires in Argentina at a design for a tech company, basically in Argentina. Long story. Well, it was great. It was a really good experience. And so this company, we used to play football with the other guys who worked with me every Thursday. And I can tell you, like, being an Englishman playing football against Argentinians, they don't back out of challenges. Like, I got a lot of bumps and bruises and some verbals as well, but it was all good fun. But anyway, it was only five-a-side football, but the company that I was working for said, hey, look, we'll give you some kits, we'll sponsor the kits, but we need a logo. And I was obviously the lead designer at the company. And I said, okay, right, yeah, stuck my hand up and I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I designed a couple of logos. It's five-a-side stuff and no one's really going to see them, only the players. But still, it was that practice which really got me into it and really like made my mind up that like, this is what I want to do. I love this, you know, designing is one thing I love, but football is something that I adore. So it's kind of the two things together was great. And I love the kind of the practice of actually creating it, because you've got a very small amount of space, but you've got to say a lot. And I love the challenge of that. And so anyway, long story short, I created these logos for a five-side full team. No one would ever see them, just me and my mates, my Argentinian mates. And they said, oh yeah, this looks really good. And I was like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I didn't really think much of it. But then as a designer, you've always got like these dream projects that you like dream about. And you're like, oh, I'd love to design or redesign that. Or I'd love to be involved in the creation of something for this industry or whatever. And so football was always at the top of that list for me. And I was always kind of like, yep, my ambition is to one day design a logo for a football team. And designing a logo for a five-a-side team wasn't enough for me. So after going through that process and learning about like the best way to do it and approach it, I got my break in football teams that you would have heard of through Alfred Town. So I designed a couple of designs, not the logo that you see now for Alfred Town, but I did some different designs, and I just did them for fun, and it was just kind of like challenging. But I said to myself, right, I'm gonna send this to the club, see what they think, because if it's just sitting on my computer, then you know it's good for me. But it's like, why not just reach out to the football club? And so I sent over the designs to the football club, and I did this big presentation on like why they should change their logo, what the benefits would be of it, what's not working about their current logo. So it's all very detailed and very professional. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really expecting to get anything back from them. I thought, well, you know, I'll send it. but I'm sure nothing will come back. And then one day I got an email that came in, and I was like, and it said from Alfreton Town, and I was like, oh wow. And I like, even then I thought, this is just going to be, thanks for your time and effort, we appreciate it, but we don't want to change. But luckily, and this is what started it all for me, was they said, hey, we really like your presentation, we like the amount of detail you put into it, we like your idea, let's have a chat. And so even though the two logos that I designed to send them weren't the logos that you see today, it started the conversation. And then from there, we had that first kickoff meeting, which I mentioned earlier. And we started talking about the football club, the history of the football club, the current brand. And then we started talking about conversations about the town of Alfreton being named after King Alfred the Great, and how we started ideating on, it would be really good if we could have a king as part of the logo to kind of reference that history. And then in the research phase, found out that like one of the original logos for Alfreton Town featured a king within the design. So yeah, no, that's how it got started. It was a random email, but a very detailed presentation, and it just started the conversation, and we went from there.
That's a really sort of interesting way of, you know, getting business and kickstarting your sort of career in football badges. You know, would you sort of recommend to someone young, maybe at university at the moment, who's trying to get into this, doing the mock-up designs like you did, and just sending it to the club? Because really it's about right place, right time. I think that's what you found with Alfreton, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of right place, right time. But what I would recommend is that you're prepared. So you have examples of football logo designs in your portfolio. You have documentation on why a football club should update its logo. And so once you initiate that first conversation, you have to have visuals, firstly, to show that you can do the job and you can like bring success to the football club through its brand and through a redesign. But also it's like that knowledge of beyond the logo, like what else can you offer and why should you offer it? And I think if you want to get into it, because it means so much to so many that you can't really get it wrong. If you get it wrong, it's pretty bad for a football club. So you have to, in my opinion, this would be my advice, is just to live it. And I think about football, it's just going to sound really nerdy, but I think about football logo design when I wake up in the morning and when I go to bed at night. It's just, I love it. It does sound nerdy, doesn't it? But yeah, I love it. So just, my advice would be, make sure that you're prepared when the moment comes and you know all the answers and you've got the work to back it up, and you've got a portfolio of strong designs and concepts. And even if they're not for professional clubs, even if it's like me, I started off doing the designs for like a five-a-side football team. It's super low level, but it shows that you've got an understanding of the craft and you can create something which is pretty decent.
Yeah, and again, for the people, you know, the real people who are just literally just starting out, what sort of programs would you recommend as basics? Is it, you know, your Photoshops, your Illustrators sort of thing?
Yeah, all of them. I think also because it's not just a logo that you should be giving a club, you should be giving them more than just the logo. You need to have a good knowledge of all of the Adobe product, and also sketching as well. Don't underestimate the value of quick sketches and quick ideas and jotting stuff down and using your hands and pen and paper, old traditional way. But then after that, the programs that I would use, I'd go to Illustrator to refine the logo and digitize it. And then I'd probably go to Photoshop just to test the logo and battle test it against how it would look on a t-shirt, how it would look on a hat. Does it look good as a small icon on social media? And then I'd even dip into other programs like Premiere or After Effects as well, because I do a lot of video stuff as well, which is advantageous to the football club, because, as you know, video performs really well on social media and in other places. You can tell a little bit more of a story. So as part of the final package, when I'm giving over the brand to the football club, I give them videos as well. So yeah, it's a knowledge of all of the Adobe suite. They all kind of feed into each other. It's all part of the creative process. So yeah, I would recommend teaching yourself or doing a course on all of the Adobe stuff.
That's brilliant. Listen, I've really enjoyed speaking to you about this. I mean, it's so interesting for me to actually, because, you know, when I was actually younger, I wanted to be a graphic designer, and it turns out I've just gone into the sort of media management side of things. But, you know, just the process you do and behind it's so interesting for me. And I think this is going to be a really great episode. So thanks for coming on first and foremost. You know, I do have one last question for you, which obviously you've listened to the podcast, so you know what's coming. But what essentially is your dream job?
Yes, I did know that this question was coming because I'm a big fan of your podcast. My dream. I think I'll be honest. I'm probably living it. I'd say being a footballer would have been my dream job, but yeah, that didn't work out. But the second best job is being a football brand, football logo designer. It's just the two passions just working together, and also like seeing the impact that it has on football clubs and the positive impact. It's yeah, I feel very proud.
And there's episode 10, done and dusted. As you heard there, Chris Payne giving a fantastic insight into his very niche business of football brand designing. I'd encourage anyone who made it this far to check out his website. I'll link it in the description. He does some really cool stuff, and I'm actually just looking at it now. He's just released his branding for the actual Puerto Rican Football League, so really interesting just flicking through his work, and would highly recommend if graphic design or marketing is your thing. As you've heard from the conversation, there's so much that goes on into designing a football brand. For instance, I can see his most recent project actually took 6 months. For someone like me who wanted to be a graphic designer, I find it fascinating, and I hope the listeners really did as well. I think what's so great about this podcast is there's so many different niches in this world of football or sports media, and I really can't wait to speak and find out about each and every one. That being said, if you are a sports media professional and want to feature on the podcast in an area I haven't covered yet, please do get in touch with my personal Twitter, which is @Dan_Simmonite, working on getting rid of that underscore, or the Press Conference podcast channels, just search @PressConfPod. We also have a Facebook group with over 2,200 members, very active, new sports media jobs posted all the time, and a real supportive community and safe place to ask questions and get feedback on your work. So if you want to join that for free, the link will be in the description as well. And obviously we now hit 10 episodes, which is a landmark really. This podcast was born out of the COVID-19 lockdown in the UK, which, to be honest, I was pretty much sat on my ass doing very little on furlough, so I'm very pleased we got to this stage. It's been a bit busy starting back full-time work in the past few weeks, also juggling recording new episodes, moving into my new flat, so I'm not going to commit to a schedule for uploading these for a bit until I'm set up in my new gaff, but as I said, I do want to get more consistent with these, and if you're listening and have a good story or insight to give, please do get in touch.